Hi guys. This one has been on the cards for a while now. It's the, well, I'm going to call it vintage, Mikes Models X Corris coach. The reason for the delay in this one was that ENDON Valley Custom Decals has resized their 16mm decals to fit this one for me. And now for you if you'd like them. I really can't see the model coach being correctly made without the lining. It's a mix of plastic and white metal, but it's not that straightforward to put together, and you'll see that soon. You'll need these. They're instructions. My first issue to sort out is that because the kit was put together so long ago, sellotape has gone all gross and sticky on it, so that needs to go. You can see how sticky it is. My first attempt at this was to use IPA. I sprayed a bit on and rubbed it in. This did next to nothing, except bring disappointment to my family. I then remembered that I had tar and glue remover in my car cleaning bag. And it made sense that this should probably work. And it really did. It didn't take much manhandling to get this nice and clean. And my family's name was once again held high. Moving on with squeaky clean components, and I can cut them free from the spurs. I was shown some nice tools at Statfold by a viewer of the channel. And it would have done this job really well, but since I forgot to buy some, I'm still using my knife. These parts are then tidied up with a file. The chassis is white metal, and that can be cleaned up in the same way. I did find that this piece has bent out to shape, so I had to fettle it a bit on a block of glass to get it all levelled up again. Whilst I was below deck, I glued the bogies together. These only consist of 3 parts each, so they don't take much time. It's time now for the main body to get assembled, and as it's all plastic, the best method is a cement like liquid poly. Instead of simply gluing the pieces at the join, it'll melt and fuse them together. It's so strong. It does take a few minutes to start to dry, so you can set the sides up sitting at a nice 90-degree angle with time to spare. The main outside walls of the coach are simple enough, and they do seem to fit nicely when they're glued onto the chassis. This was done with super glue. The buffer beams fit in between the frame ends, though I found these needed a little bit of work to get them sitting correctly. It is nice though because they have pre-drilled holes for the buffers. The buffers themselves need a light going over with the file to remove any flashing, but when they're tidied up, they can go straight in. There's frame detail to add on as well, so I will, I guess. One detail that I wanted to add on outside were the grab handles that span the width of the 2 compartments. I had some spare wire from some old wagon kits left over. This was cut to length and glued on with super glue. A formed floor isn't included in the kit, but a piece of plastic art is provided so you can make your own. The entrance to the coach protrudes the sides of it, so this needs to be taken into consideration when you measure it up. I also fancied a little bit of detail here, so I scribed blanket onto the floor. This can then be glued down inside the sides. It sits on top of spaces between the frames, and if you've put the coach together square, it'll slot in nicely. With the floor glued and dry, I can finally add in the remaining compartment sides. These two have to be added after the floor is set in the coach because they sit on top of it for some reason. The second additional detail I added to the coach were the seats. It does come with a cast-in for the middle seat, but not for the main benches inside. These were just made out of plasticard. I did scribe some detail into them, but I don't think that was needed. The parts are ready to spray up now, so the first coat is a grey car primer to give the top coat something to key onto. The bogies are an easy one, but the coach body has quite fine details, so I need to spray multiple passes from different angles to catch it all. And the same goes for the top coat. If I didn't do this, the coach would end up with some shadowed areas where the brown is not able to hit. This brown also needs a couple of good coats to get a solid finish. You can see the final coat going on here and how different it looked to the first. Trying to do this in one hit would definitely result in some paint runs. The brown has dried, so I can mask up the body to spray the black on the frames. I do this in two pieces. The first is a thinner strip to get a nice clean edge. And the second is a thicker tape that works to cover the rest of the visible coach. You need to make sure that you press the tape down onto the first strip to minimise any paint spraying through the gap. The final effort here is to protect the interior by sealing it all in with a piece of kitchen roll on top. The black is then applied. I've tried to apply this in a thick dry mixture, as in with as little water as I can get away with. The airbrush will struggle with this passing through it, but it'll hit the model much better, which will mean I'll get a better covering in the corners. The floor of the coach is painted next, and I'm doing this by hand now because I value my sanity, or what's left of it. It's just a random grey from the collection that looked about right. It may have been worthwhile gluing the seating in after the floor was painted, but I just don't think that way at the time. The grab handles are painted black. This is done with a black primer for a nice dark finish. As I mentioned before, the scribing on the benches was quite pointless as the coach actually has cushions on them, so those are painted on in a nice dark red. The bogies are fine in the black that was sprayed on before, but they do need a little blob of detail in the form of yellow axle box covers. This yellow has been dulled a little bit with a drop of black. And on to the main event, the decals. I was nervous about getting these on straight, but ENDON have printed them as full panel decals, not separate lining, which was a brilliant idea. This means that they're strong and they keep their shape. They're also much quicker to apply to the model. They're applied in the same way though, meaning that the decal is soaked in water to remove it from the backing paper. Decal fix is applied to the panel and the decal is slid onto it. This can be adjusted while the decal fix is still wet behind it. I use a cotton bud to dab at the adjusted decal to get it to grip the panel. And when I'm happy with the position on the coach, I roll the cotton bud over the decal to squeeze any liquid out. And that's about it. As I say, super easy and super quick. And same goes for the larger panels. Decal fix has been applied and the decal is slid over it. You can see that I'm using my finger to hold it down as I remove it from the backing paper. This is because my lovely soft finger won't rip the decals. The coach then gets a nice coating of satin varnish. This harmonises any finishes from different types of paints and seals in those decals good and proper. This is important as they'd be vulnerable without the varnished coat. In fact, any liquid spilt on the model would loosen the decals back off again. I've taken advice from Colin, you know Colin. He said to add the glazing post-wash. I've been washing windows after the washes on these coaches, but this does seem a more logical approach, so let's do it. Black wash with no windows in. I'm only giving this a light wash this time because it's not long been restored, so it looks posh. When the wash is dry, the glazing can start. It is a bit fiddly on the Corris coach due to the windows wrapping around the compartments, and the coach only having very thin window struts. They're measured up and cut from clear plasticard, and once glue and glaze has been applied to the model, the glazing is pushed on and into place. I must say it does look a lot better with super clean windows. Fair play, Colin. It's just a case now of working around the model and fitting each piece in. The fine detail that I'm adding here are the grab handles on the coach entrance. These are curved, and to get them to match, I'll form them around the handle of the pointy tool thing. These are glued into place with super gel. This dries slightly slower than super glue, so it gives a tiny window to adjust them. And because they haven't been primed with the rest of the coach, I'll use the same black primer as before, as this will grip onto the metal better. And it won't just flake off like normal acrylic probably would. I'll make the roof out of the same plasticard as the flooring. This is a good thickness, as it's just thick enough to hold its shape, but thin enough to be formed by rolling it around something roly shaped, like the body of this knife. I've sprayed that with primer, and as I wait for it to dry, I'll attach the bogies to the coach. This coach kit doesn't use the usual screw and nut setup, but instead the bogies drop onto protruding nips. They're then locked in place by gluing a cap over the top of the nip that's wider than the bogie central hole. The roof can now go on, and because it was rolled to shape beforehand, it'll hopefully not sag in the middle. The roof is then weathered to match the coach. I'll just be careful not to let it run down the sides of the now dry coach body. And that's it, one super iconic and recognisable coach. I won't lie, the kit does really show its age these days, especially looking at the ends of it. But those decals really make it shine. It's common to see this coach model, but it's actually rare to see it in anything more than just a brown. And it misses a trick like that. So they're now available from ENDON if you need them. It wouldn't hurt modelling this coach on the corris layout now. In fact, if you follow me on Instagram, I've probably already put a photo of it on there. Anyway, you're stopping me from starting work on the layout, so leave me alone, go home. But come back next Friday because you'll see some lovely treats that I have for Nantquernal. Cheers.